Coming up to 6:32 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Minister in the Ministry of the People, Vanilla Toppin, says she's sorry for comments she made in the lower house. During debate on a motion of no confidence in the opposition leader, Mrs. Toppin told a story which some believe suggested Dr. Rowley was born as a result of rape and that these circumstances have made him aggressive and arrogant. In a statement, Minister Toppin said, and I quote, "I unreservedly apologize to everyone who felt uncomfortable or outraged because of parts of the statements I made in Parliament. At no time was I intending to cause pain or suffering or to cause people to reopen old wounds of trauma they may have at some time experienced," end quote. However, the minister added that Dr. Rowley still has questions to answer. Well, we're joined now by Minister in the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources and member of the UNC Women's Group, Ramona Ramdial. She's also, of course, member of Parliament for Couva North. A very good morning to you. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
How could you all have allowed this?
As I said, her apology reiterated, you know, her deep hurt.
Then why say it?
Well, you know, that is something that Ms. Toppin will need to answer for herself. I really cannot answer for her.
I appreciate that, but it's interesting, Ms. Ramdial,
yes,
and that when Dr. Rowley made the statement about dog and cat, the UNC Women's Arm was quick to come out in condemnation of his statements.
Yes, definitely.
You all have been very silent in relation to this one.
No, well, I mean, a lot of ministers were interviewed yesterday, and they said that the statements were unfortunate. But what is the positive thing about it is that an apology was issued right away on behalf of the member for Tobago East, and therefore I think that has some sort of credibility, and she should be given some sort of leeway in terms of the apology that came out after.
Let me, if I may ask.
Because if you look at Dr. Rowley, actually, the so-called apology that he made wasn't really an apology either.
So does one justify the other?
Definitely not, but by our actions, you can see that we are, of course, concerned about the statements. We condemn certain elements of the statements, and therefore an apology was made right away.
If I were to make on this show, if I were to make insulting, sexist, racist, nasty comments about you, to your face, and subsequently apologize, would you accept it?
This is not about my personal opinion at the end of the day. I mean, everybody thinks differently. However, as I said, the apology speaks for itself. She has made some action and done some work with respect to, you know, her statements that she made, and she said it out to the public.
And obviously it's very uncomfortable for the government. That goes without saying. The question now needs to be asked, was this vetted by anyone in government, anyone in cabinet? Was this vetted by the Prime Minister? Because the Prime Minister stood there. There was no attempt to intervene, to interrupt whether a note was being passed to say, well, okay, shut up now, you're done causing enough trouble. So clearly this was said and done with the full approval of the Prime Minister.
No, we cannot say that at all. That individual crafted her speech, came to Parliament, and as any member of Parliament, in that moment of speaking and debating, your speech can be modified, you can make changes, or you can...
But it was a prepared statement. She was reading from a prepared statement.
Well, I sit right next to her, so I really can't assume all of that to say that the entire speech was being read, because sometimes I have a prepared script, but I don't really read everything from it.
Sure.
So I really can't assume as to that, but to say that the Cabinet and the Prime Minister gave approval to that, definitely not.
Well, we haven't heard the Prime Minister condemn it.
Well, at least I can say for a fact, being with my colleagues and caucusing and all of that, that never came up.
Fair enough, but the point I'm getting at, because we're Ms. Ramdial...
But you see, the point is, Fazir, with all due respect, at the end of the day, it was a motion of censure, a vote of no confidence in Parliament.
Sure.
The PNM got up and walked out of Parliament. They fully well know the whole issue of parliamentary privilege. I'm not saying that it was warranted, the statements made, but I'm saying, why walk out? Why not sit there and debate and have the debate going, and of course have your person stand up on your side? I mean, it's a parliamentary debate.
Sure.
It's government versus opposition at the end of the day. We're there We're there to argue and debate this motion, and therefore I think it was very humiliating on the part of the PNM to walk out of the parliament and not sit and debate that motion of no confidence. And different questions arises. Is it that the leader of the opposition realizes that he may not have gotten his support from all of his members, and therefore there was a chance of one of two of them who has been rejected by the PNM for the upcoming general elections voting for and with the government against that leader? Because it's a whole leadership issue at the end of the day. You look at the actions of the leader from 2010 till now, the opposition leader, a lot of misstatements, a lot of poor decision-making, actions that seemed volatile that came out in public over the years. And therefore, when you aspire to be leader and hold high public office, there's a certain level of conduct that comes in sitting in that office. And therefore, I think that the PNM should have stayed in Parliament and debate. And how does that in any way divert from what is seen as the wholly and totally inappropriate statement from Vanilla Allen Toppin? It doesn't. It doesn't. But at the end of the day, as I said, they have a duty to Parliament. I mean, yes, there are times when you can get up and walk out and not agree with the motion of no confidence and all of that. But if you really, why come now in all this uproar? As I said before, I'm not saying that her statements are accepted and all of that, and I approve of it and all of that. But what I'm saying really and truly, that was your opportunity to sit there, to be there, to clear the air, to get up, to rise a motion of objection, improper motives, imputed improper motives. You know how it goes in Parliament. Yes. So therefore, I mean, I think the opportunity was there for the opposition leader to stay in Parliament and, of course, object to these things. What do you think would have been the government's reaction if Dr. Rowley or one of his minions had stood up and talked about Kamla Prasad-Bissessa being a product of rape or incest or infidelity, and as a result of that, it explains her type of behavior? Well, at that point in time, I know for a fact that we would not walk out of any motion of no confidence. We have stayed and condemned in every instance of no confidence. We've stayed in Parliament, we've debated, we've cleared the air, and then after we made statements outside of Parliament. But at the end of the day, as a parliamentarian, you have a duty of care to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course to represent effectively. I'm glad you made that point about duty of care. How does that particular contribution and I need to point out the reactions of your government to her statements, how does that constitute really showing a duty of care towards the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, women? We just had Dr. Gabrielle Hussein talking about the need to be mindful of issues of rape and gender issues and so on, how it affects the victims, and to lay it out in the public domain like that? Yes. How does that fall under the rubric of duty of care? Well, she did start off by saying we need to have conversations, more conversations about the topic in general in Trinidad and Tobago, because we have conversations by bringing something open like that in the Parliament? No. Understand what I'm saying. Just generally, the issue of rape, sexual assault, abuse of women, violence against women, and all of that. And I acted as Minister of State in the Ministry of Gender and Youth Development for a year. And I can tell you personally, in dealing with these stakeholders and victims, that there is a need for conversations to be had within society and for people to be open, because a lot of rape victims don't come out and say that they've been raped or abused and all of that. And that's one of the reasons why we are unable to deal with it as those in authority in terms of legislation, in terms of going out there and counseling and all of that. So the victims suffer, and that's just in general. Sure. So she did start with that we need to have discussions. But with respect to the specific comments made, again, yes, I condemn it, as many of my cabinet colleagues. However, the minister has made an apology. And therefore, I think anything further into that foray in terms of between Ms. MP Toppin, in terms of validifying the story, questions to still be answered, etc., etc., that really needs to be directed to her. I appreciate that, but what I'm saying is that she is a member of a political party. Definitely. She's a member of government. Yes. Should she not be censured for that particular statement in the Parliament? That is why I said the PNM opposition should have remained in Parliament and therefore do that. But it's not for the PNM to do that. It's for the UNC, for the People's Partnership, for Kamla Prasad-Bissessa to do that. And at the same time, I mean, we are all cabinet colleagues. We are of the same party, and at that point in time, when that individual is speaking, he or she is liable to change their speech, as I said before, put in, add in, take out, all of that. You know,
so I just want to
it's a very dynamic situation.
But I want to understand how things work. Let's say a madness take me and I end up in Parliament, and I stand up on the government side and say, you see my colleague here, he's a thief, he's a liar, this one is a stinking dog, you see that one is a rapist, and so on. Wouldn't someone on the cabinet, on the government side, jump up and think, find some mechanism to shut me up?
Probably not. You understand?
Probably not. But I mean, we might be smiling, Minister,
yes,
but
yes.
This is a very serious
situation.
situation.
You see, but it's a lot. It's based on assumptions. I mean, at the end of the day, the statement was made, and the Member of Parliament, of course, sent out a formal apology. You know, I mean, we can't go back
part of the, if I can. Talking about questions still must be answered, including the paternity of a young man who was the product of a relationship out of wedlock. Questions include whether Dr. Rowley is the grandfather of one, or in fact 2 young children. Questions include whether Dr. Rowley knows of any school teacher who was a tenant in Charlottesville, and so on. So what I'm saying is that you say at the top, I unreservedly apologize to everyone who felt uncomfortable or outraged. She didn't apologize for what she said. She apologized to those who felt uncomfortable or outraged. There's a significant difference there. She hasn't really apologized. Basically what she said, if you all are offended by what I've said, I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry for what I've said.
And those questions are best directed towards her.
And in that sense, and I know it goes without saying it's an uncomfortable situation, yes, for the Women's Arm, especially for the UNC, for the People's Partnership. Does this suggest, heading into a general election, we're waiting for the election bell to be rung, does this suggest that this is going to be the nastiest political campaign that we've ever had to endure in Trinidad and Tobago?
I mean, we can use isolated instances, both on the PNM side and the UNC side. We have both gone into some gutter politics, as you have seen. Therefore, I would hope as a young woman in politics that we not continue. There's a certain level of conduct that we need to exercise as members of Parliament representing the wider citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago. So I know for myself, as I speak, that I won't be delving into any sort of gutter politics at the end of the day. We deal with the issues at hand.
But do you expect, given what, and of course, you would expect the People's National Movement to make a lot of noise about this. We had the PNM Women's Arm, the one in Tobago. While they said nothing about the dog and cat comments, in the same way, they're quick to jump on this one. And this is the thing that worries the wider citizenry, who really could care about the politics. They are saying that you express outrage only when it serves your interests. What's your view on that? Because you have the PNM making a heap of noise now when they were saying nothing about the dog and cat comments, and now the UNC are silent after Vanilla Allen Toppin's comments. So how do you feel about that as a person and as a politician?
No, well, at the end of the day, as I said before, I just reiterated my position. However, yes, you are right in terms of the political ping-pong back and forth on a platform that is expected in an election year, and therefore there are certain boundaries which we don't cross, and I think both sides have crossed to a certain extent. And with respect to my party and the People's Partnership government, however, you have seen that MP Toppin has come out and apologized, as much as people may have different opinions on the apology itself and the statements made within the apology. But when you look at the leader of the opposition, and the apology came a couple of days after and all of that, that in itself says something about the gentleman and the leadership of that particular party going into an election. And
because we've talking about how ugly the election campaigning can be, are you concerned that even if you are not inclined to do it, that you may be drawn in, because it could be seen to be a very close race, you may be drawn in to an environment, to a situation, you could be sitting on the podium when certain comments are made that could be very derogatory about in a sexist way, and that you have to just simply to do the party loyalty thing and slap and smile and be part of that? Are you worried about something like that?
Usually, yes, we are concerned about statements made on platforms, both politically and in Parliament and otherwise. At the end of the day, it's up to the individual who is at that point in time expressing statements to the public. As I said before, every individual will think differently. The more experienced members of Parliament will have a way, and of course, getting the political ping-pong across without being, you know, vicious or cruel That's what to say.
And finally, and I know you've been reiterating the same point over because of how this situation has developed. But finally, do you think that this casts the Prime Minister as, if not a hypocrite, engaged in an act of hypocrisy, because she has championed the cause of women, she has championed the cause of the vulnerable, and she has had maintained a deafening silence on this since what was said on. Does that make her a hypocrite?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. At the end of the day, the Member of Parliament is responsible for her statements. She has issued an apology.
Isn't the PM responsible for everybody in the government?
But you see, that's somewhat grey in terms of statement made as a Member of Parliament in Parliament. I mean, of course, we have the parliamentary rules and regulations, standing orders. So, it's, as I said before, it's a very dynamic situation. But I want to say that our ministry has been very forward in going ahead through the Ministry of Gender, Youth and Child Development to develop legislation, to enact legislation, and of course to continue to build structures, to create an enabling environment to protect our men and children and women. And therefore we continue to do that. We will continue to work and strive towards that. Okay. As I said before, the apology was made. It says much more as opposed and compared to the opposition leader himself. And I rest it. I leave it there.
Tit for tat continues, Minister. Thanks very much for taking the time and being available to discuss this issue. And clearly, it's to say it's an awkward time for the government, to say it's an uncomfortable time for the government, is like saying the West Indies disappointed that they were knocked out in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Not trying to equate the same, but it's clearly something that causes great concern for us in the wider society about what is said in what is considered to be the highest forum in the land of Parliament. We'll take a break and come right back here on Morning Edition.